Hey guys, welcome back to Enlightened Turtle. It's your host Kev here. So yes, we are back to Enlightened Turtle. Yes, that's correct. Let's move on. Today we're going to be doing my first video for a little while, actually, to be fair. And as I said in my post on the YouTube there, this has been a good period for me, to be honest. The last few videos, I was quite happy with the information I was able to put in them videos because I understood most of what I was saying. So I just pulled in some thoughts and tried to make videos. The last couple of months though, I feel like I've leveled on quite a bit. I've read more of the materials, it's digested a little bit, and I've started to come up with more of my own ideas and streamlined and made them, the ones that I had previously, a little bit more watertight. So in today's video we're going to be kind of carrying on that theme, discuss a little bit about the Dorians, the area of the Middle East and the Levant and the Aegean, that area, Asia Minor, and the connections with Britain. And I did download a map and start doing some stuff on there, so we might have a little look through that as well, depending on how time goes. So without further ado, sorry for the long intro, let's get straight into it.
Now, one of the major things that we've done in our studies is to delve into the ancient history of the Brits. Now, in delving into ancient British history, we found a peculiarity.
So I've typed out some things the last couple of weeks, and I'm just going to read from what I've typed out, and then we'll work off that and maybe look for some images and stuff online. Are the Greeks Greek? Are the Athenians from Ionia? Who, what and where is Ionia, you might ask? Well, let's have a look. Given the British Hittite-Phoenician connection, through linguistical, cultural, archaeological, topographical and other such fields of data, dating back to at least the Middle Ages of the Bronze Age, how is it so that mainstream institutional doctrines claim that the Western European languages, such as the Brythonic dialect, Cymric and Ogham, etc., evolved from an older Greek system after the Greeks/Anatolians settling in Britain? And why are there so many Sumerian words in English? Well, these are the things we're going to come into further down the line, the language structure and things like that, because as I say, I started making claims and I stand by my claims. I've made some translations on previous videos, but I'm more dipping my toes in and translating certain words when it comes to phrases and full understanding. I'm probably never going to get there. It's like a whole area of study that people spend a lifetime doing, which unfortunately I'm not going to be able to catch up to. But as we move through all this information, I'm going to try and do bits as we move through, and then hopefully by the end we've got like a more bigger picture, rather than have to like spend 6 months focusing on one topic just to do a video. So as we move forward, the advent of certain technologies, I will just say, and there's not just Sumerian words to be found in English, there's a lot of different words from different cultural periods. This is where I touched on this in a post I made on Facebook before I got banned from there, where I was discussing that English is seemingly the only language that has been replaced in a nation after a conflict. So whenever you go to, this was in a book that I was reading, and during a long period of history, it detailed all the different conflicts, and you could go into these different countries after the conflict and the language had not necessarily been completely replaced. It just it become more of like a governance language, so the language used to govern and things like that. But it seems like in Britain the whole language was replaced, well, more so England, and this is obviously when the Anglo-Saxons came over. did the Anglo-Saxons come over and restructure and rechange a whole language system? Well, I believe, same as this author in this book and a few other people have come across, that Lacrinus and Laregia, you know, ancient England actually had its own language, and it was part of the same structure as all the other runic structured languages, whether that be Ogund, Cymric, or wherever, you know, Scotiae, come down, like I say, into Western Europe, as we're going to be looking on in a little bit, and all those North African nations. They all spoke a similar language, and it was that Phoenician language that travelled along the Mediterranean. So there's a lot of different interpretations of the English language itself, but it seems like, from what I can gather, I mean, Wilson and Blackett, they talk about the Iceni and the, forgive me, what's the name? Isingalas, I think the culture, the people or the tribe was the Isingalas tribe, and they seem to think that that's where the English language comes from. It's a etymological evolution from there. And the way I can say, I'll leave it with this, the way I can kind of explain it is, the English language seems to be like the Hindu culture in the eastern extremities of the Indo-European culture. So you've got to imagine the Indo-European branch extends from the northern area of Europe, Britain, Scandinavia, France, all that kind of stuff, all the way down through Europe, along the Mediterranean, in parts, different periods of time and stuff, into, you know, Assyria, down into northern Pakistan, where you've got Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, you know, the Indus Valley culture, and then it goes into India, where the Indians obviously are famous for basically assimilating all the other cultures that came into the area, assimilating the gods, the beliefs, the traditions, while still maintaining their own historical picture from the Vedas and stuff like that, which we need to touch on in a future video, the Vedas, because obviously the Vedas are their like prose-edda, you know, that's their cultural, historical, gods, mythology, creation, all that kind of stuff comes in through there. And there's a lot of connections with that stuff to the ancient Assyrian, Akkad culture of Mesopotamia, as is with like L.A. Waddell's work, which we're going to be looking at more into the future as well. Probably touch on it a little bit in a minute. He believes that British Hittite connection travelled all the way along the Mediterranean into Britain, and then it exploded from there. And I might go on to a video clip in a minute, like I say, time permitting. It's the first video I've done in a while, so apologies already if I'm waffling and going down all kinds of segues. So I'll leave that there. We've only just done one paragraph. So the advent of certain technologies and such has meant the creation of many new English words, of course, but going back there are plenty. So there's plenty of Sumerian words in English. I don't think I've picked too many out, but we'll have a quick look. The word canal, for example, borrowed from Middle French canal, which some people who watch sport might know, Canal TV, you know, stream football and that back in the day. From Old French canal, from Latin canalis, which means channel or canal, from canalis, canal, from cana, which means reed cane, from ancient Greek kava or kavana reed, from Akkadian canu with Q, canu, which means reed, from Sumerian gina, doublet of sh, anal, I think they're supposed to be channel with a double N. So you've got the evolution, and you can see in the middle of the screen now, you can see the Sumerian and Akkadian symbols, and look how similar they are. Obviously they are so close together, but it seems as though from this initial focal point of the languages in Mesopotamia, whether it be from the Caucasus to northern Syria, into Anatolia. This area for me seems to be the cradle. Now we will discuss a little bit the migrations and stuff like that, because that's going to be a key component coming later down the line, and I didn't want to just go straight into all the choice stuff again. I thought I'd try and solidify a little bit of what we've already talked about before we move into all these other areas and things like that. So as you can see, you've got the etymological evolution there for the word canal, going all the way back into the pictographic symbols and what they mean, all the way in Sumeria and Akkad. So you have that. Yet the fall of the Mycenaean Greek world collapsed with the arrival of the Dorian invasion around 3,000 years ago, first landing on Crete, eradicating the Minoan civilization. So this Dorian population went on to be established as the Ionian Greeks. There was different fractions of the what came to be the Dorians, and then you had like the Ionians and the Lydians, I think it is, if I'm not mistaken, and these ended up being predominantly the same group of people that eventually branched out here, branched out there, and mingled with some already existing cultures of the area. So as you say there, you had the eradication of the Minoan civilization. It's like, say, you've got this different branches of the Dorians and then the locals that came to be different powerhouses in the area before any actual powerhouse, before the arrival of the city-states of the Aegean. So you had a little bit of, like I say, with a lot of the stuff, there's a bit of nuance that needs to be taken into play. I'll just reread this. This Dorian population went on to be established as the Ionian Greeks, modern Greek language born out of Chione, a regional dialect that's expanded, of which is the language claimed that travelled west over the following millennia. So the language that the Dorians arrived with in 3000 BC actually is supposed to be the language that travelled west. So work that out. I'm claiming that the language has already existed in the west, it's come east, exploded in this area, and then we've seen an evolution of an already existing culture in the area, and it's taken on more traits, as well as that's coming from the west. You're getting this constant expansion and migrations coming from the east, because there seems to have constantly been migrations in and out, to be honest, not to mention along the steppes and then around. We'll come on to that in a bit. Greek settlers are claimed to have been on the Iberian Peninsula around the 7th century BCE. I've done a typo there. Having continuous contact with the Phoenician traders going from the Levant to Britain, which is how the Ionian Greek civilization spread its culture. Though it seems to me, if indeed a conflict had taken place in Britain around the 3rd millennium BC, as stated in previous videos, then it is feasible to me that the Greek settlers that landed in the region we call Spain and Portugal of today in the 7th century BCE, that is, could have been settlers of this Dorian Trojan culture moving backwards and forwards along the well-established Mediterranean routes. So again, you know, we've got to look at Carthage, the Balearic Islands, all the islands along the Mediterranean still. We're still trying to put markers in place of when people moved here or when people moved there. It's very difficult, and we're going to see as we move through, but we are getting there, to be honest. When one thinks of Greece, one of the main players is Athens, who claim descent from the Ionians. But who were the Ionians and where did they come from? Let's look at the details, shall we? The expansion of the Dorians, as told to us, came from their invasion over Crete, a Greek island, modern-day Greece, in the south of the Aegean Sea, and spread out into parts of Anatolia and then all over Greece. So as we remember from that previous video about the Troad, whether it was in Britain or Anatolia, they claim that this prince came over, Troilus, went over to Anatolia, got involved in a wrestling competition in some king's city. The king gave him a magical cow, and wherever the cow sat down, that's where they were going to found the city of Troy. And there was people who were making claims that the city of Troy over there was obviously Ilam or Hisarlik, and some claim, like Schliemann and that, obviously they call it Hisarlik, they claim that this city in a certain strata layer was that city. But we broke it down, it's just no way, it didn't make sense on timelines, it didn't make sense on anything, to be honest. So we already know that, we've already gone through that creation story on how these Dorians allegedly, potentially may have came in and pushed out these Greeks or these Cretans, Minoans in the area. We then went into Anatolia, but the official narrative doesn't seem to make sense, and the stories that are presented are hinged on mythology from several hundred years later, which, you know, it's quite repetitive really in this field. But the expansion of the Dorians, as told to us, came down and then spread out all over Greece, including the founding of a revered state known to most as Sparta. So this is really cool. We shall use Sparta as an example here, and the reasoning behind this is Sparta is on the opposite side of the Aegean, wow, don't know how I've spelt that there, the Aegean Sea to Anatolia, yet are both linked, as we shall see. Tradition describes how some 60 years after the Trojan War, a Dorian migration from the north took place and eventually led to the rise of classical Athens, more so Attica, Macedonia and Sparta. The Sidonians, otherwise known as the Cudonians or Cudones, they seem to be the same people as the Cetones or Cetones, mentioned a millennia later by Tacitus, living in the northern extremities of Europe. So the Sidonians are not to be confused with the Sidonians or Sidones, whom lived in Medina, Sidonia in South Spain. Could they be similar peoples that split out earlier on and settled in different places? That's a potentiality. That's why you have the similar namesake. Not to mention that there's certain fractions that you still find in Spain, whether that be the Basque. This is obviously said southern Europe. That's the area that you know, Gibraltar, Pillars of Hercules, where there was a Phoenician colony. But we'll discuss more of this stuff later on. This tradition of an influx from the north is, however, thought by the mainstream to be controversial, as it was written down at a time later than the event they described, which is a fair point, though is also a hypocritical one, given nearly all originals of ancient literature have been lost or destroyed, whether through the ravages of time or book burnings, from the Great Fire of Alexandria or the Normans burning British records, to the Nazi book cleansings of World War II. Sparta has a history from the ancient Doric Greek city-state in Laconia or Laconia, known as Sparta. From its beginning, in the legendary period, to its incorporation into the Achaean League under the Roman Republic as an allied state in 146 BC, a period that lasted roughly 1,000 years. So let's break it down. I think there was a conflict in Britain around 3100 to 1300, give or take 100, 200 years. It's very difficult, as we've mentioned, to pin that down because the margins are so big that we're given, even by the most accepted and accurate peer-reviewed archaeological studies. Now, it's very rare that you get actual dates unless they're associated with the scalings or chronology of the Egyptians, which we've discussed that in previous videos also. So yeah, you've got 1,000 years. So this Spartan culture, who, as you shall see, claim descent from a Doridic descent, the Dorians, are on mainland Greece at this point. They've arrived around the exact period that the migration force from the west may have landed in the east. Some hypothesize the date of the founding of the city to Mycenaean tribes, when the legendary king Menelaus, who helped defeat Troy, supposedly ruled the city. However, archaeologists put the date of its origin later around 1000 BC, which is the exact time to which a tribal culture called the Dorians migrated into the area of the Aegean Sea. So let me get a glass of apple juice. Cloudy apple juice, by the way, you've got to get on it. Elite. So yeah, the Mycenaean, the city that the mainstream and others attribute to Agamemnon as his city, as the Mycenaean capital, wasn't even built until the arrival of the Dorians, which seen the removal of the Minoans, who was already a fictional King Minos and all this kind of stuff. And you've got the Dorians arriving and then this building being archaeologically built at the same time. Today there is still to be found a town called Sparta in Greece, in the very same spot as the ancient city. So in a way, Spartans still exist, although these days they tend to be a little less strict and certainly not as good at fighting with spears and shields as their ancients were. Indeed. I've mentioned this in the past though. Obviously I've had a 10-year military service myself, and when you're learning tactics and things like this, manoeuvres and all that kind of stuff, but more so the structure of the army and that, you find out a lot of Spartan influence is in the British system of military code, if you will, different elements of the army. By 377 BCE, the Spartans, so this is 600-700 years after the Dorians arrived, the Spartans had been defeated in battle for the first time, and it lost Greece's leadership. So up until this point, the Dorians were the main voice in Greece. The Dorians, the Spartans. Spartan power declined due to the military, social and cultural factors that allowed other states to challenge their permanent position in the Greek world. They became solidified. I would say Rome, a few 600-700 years after its founding, the Achaean League and all that. But then you had before, when the city-states were being founded, like you say, you had this arrival of the Dorians before any of them. None of these areas were city-states, they all became states after that influx. And we've discussed in other videos about the Levant, other areas that levelled up with the arrival of these sea peoples. But yeah, we keep moving. However, the language and culture had already been firmly established of the city-states due to the initial arrival of the Dorians in Crete, which brought the language and all that kind of stuff. Potentially the history and mythology and all that. It appears so that the Dorian culture arrived en masse from the Mediterranean Sea into the Aegean Sea, as well as by land from the north, potentially originally by sea, travelling around Scandinavia and coming down from Northern Europe. As we shall see in a moment, there is a number of other nations with a similar language to these Dorians. Here we have a number of images to look at, and unfortunately I can't open them on this, so give me a moment. As we can see on this image then, I just had to look around, and most of the image I had was on my phone, so I just had to re-download them and I couldn't find all the same ones, but it's the same principle. There's still some good maps out there. So as you can see here, all these brown areas that you can see on the map, as it loops around, this, according to this map, is where the Dorians came in. So as you can see, they would have landed on Crete and then potentially went into the area we know as Sparta, and further up north, Epirus and all that, and into the southern area of Anatolia. Now this darker brown area, this is where you get the Achoiai, which is translated as the sea peoples. So we can quite clearly see the sea peoples probably did come into this area, which is a given that all the other cultures of the area have mentioned this, from the Levant to Egypt and potentially along the Mediterranean. And you've got here the Doridic bowl, if you will, coming around the Aegean Sea, and there's different colours here. So you've got the purple, which is the central section, which is Attic, Ionic, which is a cross of what you're going to see now, the Iolic, Thessalian, Boeotian, which is over. Now this is, you're talking Phrygia of the Levant, sorry, of Anatolia, and there's other different accounts of Phrygia, as I've mentioned in other videos. If I still need to do the video actually showing where all the areas in northwest Europe have similar namesakes, so you can actually see the geography of where like Achilles came from, as I mentioned in other videos. Like you've got Nestor, obviously you've got Hector, you've got Ajaxes, Antenor, and all these other people that are in there, not to mention the Amazonians, and is it the guy from Ethiopia, which is something we need to discuss as well when it comes to Ethiopia, but we'll do that when we get to there. So you've got here on this map, you can quite clearly see the Doridic influence pushed in from the south and the west. Excuse me. In this image, which doesn't look like the best quality, so I'll zoom in. Whoa. Touch screens. So there's, sorry if it's a bit blurry, as you can see, you've got Atlantis out in the Atlantic, which this theory claims the Dorians were Atlanteans, and they've come in along the Mediterranean, landed in Manos, the Minoans, Crete, and also landed in the Levant, which is where you have Israel of today, and Lebanon, and these places. So they've got the Atlanteans, being the Dorians, coming down, or the Atlanteans coming in along the Mediterranean, landing on Crete in the Levant, going up through Georgia into Scandinavia, down through Germany into Macedonia, which we'll come on to in a minute, by Alexander the Great and the Macedonians. So you've got this long migration from Atlantis that people are theorising, because there's nuggets to say that someone came out west, came out west and had this influence, but then you've got also these elements coming down from the north. So people are like, well, how can we work this out? So let's keep moving, which is what I've been doing for a little while now. My god, these pictures aren't great. So as you can see here, I'll read, you've got supposedly Mount Olympus to the north, and then you're coming down now this area where you can see Athens over here, and you can see Sparta here. So there you've had the Dorians coming, arriving somewhere around Mykonos, and no, it's not Mykonos, because Mykonos is an island. I can't even make out what that word is, but there's the Peloponnesian Mountains here. They've got the Dorians arriving somewhere in here, and then coming down south into Athens and later into Sparta. Bearing in mind that the Athens is known as Attica, so is it possible that there was Dorians there, and then the Ionians, who were a breed of the Dorians and whatever else was culturally there, 100, 200 years later move into this area and push the Dorians back out? You know, who knows? So, don't know where that love heart's come from, but I love you all. So we've had a look at them maps. Let's just go back to the writing. So you've got, in the first image, as you can see on the screen here, unfortunately it's not very good. I will zoom in a little bit to make it better, if that helps, which makes that last exercise a waste of time. So in the first image we can see the Dorians theorised to have come in from the north via land, then landed, then island hopping eastward. So in this account you've got the Dorians coming down from the north, establishing Athens, Sparta, as we've just seen in that last image, and then island hopping into this southern area over here, which we know was known as the Achoye, or the Achoye, which ties into, you know, Achiwassa and all this kind of stuff of the sea peoples, and obviously Crete there. Personally, I would suggest the Dorians landed perhaps a year or longer earlier, I should say, on places like Crete, which coincide with the extinction of the culture there, whence they began making expansions outwards. So I believe the people that would have arrived in this area would have arrived by sea quicker than by land, and even if they did come in from the north, they would have had to cross land. So I think Crete would have been the first point of call, and then a base of operations, if you will, and then started going out from there. Whilst a later, larger body of migrants made their way by land and entered via the north into Achaia, more specifically Sparta and Macedonia, Achaia being the northern regions of the Aegean. Alexander the Great's Macedonian Empire of Doridic descent during the 4th century BCE spanned from Greece to India, so why not look west? Unless it is possible he knew exactly what was there, which for me was his kin. It's his ancestry, he already knows what's that way. He's not going to go and conquer his kin and his ancestry, especially when he knows that there's hundreds of miles of tribal kings and warriors. And as we touched on in a previous video, even Hector, when he was discussing in the Trojan War, this is Hector of Troy, he mentions that the Europeans have many warlike tribes, and he was worried about them coming to the aid of the Achaeans. So, you know, it's already in the psyche that Europe was a very rough house place. You know, if you're going to go there, you better be going there to do battle. And there's not much to expand. If you go there, you're just going to have to try and tax and take over everybody there. But if they're already culturally similar, what's the point? Alexander obviously wanted to go into it says the unknown and conquer the known world and then expand the boundaries of the known world. But as we're learning, India was already part of the same ancient culture as Britain, you know, from the Bharats through the whole Indo-European language structure. Hence why he tore down the ancient city of Persepolis after the actions taken against the descendants of the Dorians by previous kings of the Assyrio-Persian Empire. So Alexander the Great, he had a bee in his bonnet over the Near East from other invasions. I think it was Darius who Alexander has the conflict with. Is it Darius the Great? But anyway, his father was obviously a great king also, and they had a line of great kings going all the way back to Sargon, really. Different fractions, Babylonians, Assyrian, Neo-Assyrian, and all this kind of stuff, but they were all culturally rooted in the same aspects that were gradually breaking out and disbanding, migrating, creating new places here, there and everywhere, which is obviously how we got the Phoenicians and all that came to Britain in the first place. Sorry if I'm waffling on, by the way. So he goes into Persepolis and tears the whole city down. He wanted to eradicate the whole area really as a cultural centre. And who knows, that is just my mind going into different areas, so I digress on that, which that is all theoretical. Though Alexander did allegedly died of unknown causes in 328 BC in the ancient city of Babylon in modern day Iraq. As we move forward over the next few months, we shall look deeper into places like Iraq, Syria, the Levant and Babylonia. And the Babylonian, Assyrian, Akkadian and Sumerian cultures and how they connect to ancient Britain of deep antiquity. And last, back to the Dorians. The Druidic legends which survived among the Dorians and which have come down to us through Pindar, Herodotus and other ancient writers say the earliest relatives of the Dorians were Macedonoi or the Macedonians, who migrated to Doris from Pindos, more precisely from Lakmos region in southern Anatolia. So let's go to these maps. Right, these are the maps that I'd started putting together on a few other things. So yeah, let's look at this one. So if you can see the cursor here, obviously this is where Sparta is. Here is Crete. Here is Attica up here. What they're saying is, according to Pindar, is that the southeastern part of the Aegean, which is here, where the cursor is, the little hand, high five, which is where the Achoi, or the sea peoples, landed in this area. They're saying they sailed across from there and established this area in Attica, which, if we just go back un momento por favor. So the Doridic legend which survived among the Dorians and which has come down to us through Pindar, Herodotus and other ancient writers say the earliest relatives of the Dorians were Macedonians, or the Macedonians, who migrated to Doris from Pindos, more precisely from the Lachmos region in southern Anatolia. So Macedonia is this area up here next to Greece, next to Athens and places like that. So they migrated by sea up there, and if you touch on what I've just said before, I believe that they landed in Crete first, because it makes sense to me as a base of operations. If you've got a navy, it's the quickest way to get there, have your most important people, or potentially an expeditionary force, unless you've already got people on the island, because they've all been well travelled anyway, and then you spread out, started taking over other colonies or integrating with them, and then they themselves become an amalgamation of two cultures over 50 or 100 years, a few generations. And their claims is that they moved into the area of Macedonia and became the Macedonians. So does that not tie into Alexander the Great? Aristotle, he would have known this, passed this information on to Alexander, hence why Alexander didn't come anywhere near this intersection of purple, but he went this way, all the way across, all the way into India. And as I said near the start of the video, if you follow this high five hand all the way back, all this area has the same ancient structures through language, philosophy, could say philosophy, but more so, it's the right word, but, you know, through like religion and law, mythology, creation myths. There's a lot of interconnecting components with both of them. So that for me, like I say, I've been trying to get this stuff together, and as I'm looking at things, I'm trying to cross-reference. That makes sense to me. This area, I believe, would have had strong influence held by the Phoenician Empire, who themselves are linked with Mesopotamia and Britain, who may hold a valuable contribution, as we shall see in a coming video, which is going to be pretty cool, which will explain further connections between the Phoenicians, the Dorians and the Barats of Britain. There is a great deal to share, which, to be honest, he is. Like I say, I've got so much to share really. So here's another map of other people putting their interpretation of how the Dorians may have influenced. And the beautiful thing is, right, I wasn't aware of any of this when I started putting the pieces together in my mind, and I'm made up because there's all the maps, there's all the ideas, and as you can see, I'm just giving a commentary on this map. But if I wanted to, there's more work I can look into, which I probably will do. So we've got Greeks from the northwest. So the Greeks from the northwest, as we know, the Greeks became the Ionians, who are in this area, as we can see where it says Asia, Doric Asia. So they've got them coming in strictly from the north by land, coming down Carpathian Mountains. There's Doris, as mentioned a moment ago, and then coming down further and then cross by land. And as you can see, these other arrows are lighter. These are moving back into Argos, which, as we touched on before, is where the Mycenaean capital was built, but according to the theory, the myth, it was Agamemnon's palace, but the archaeology puts it, the two biggest theories for the Trojan War are 1150 BCE and 650 BCE. They're the two main ones I've seen people pushing. I've seen one lad come up with something for 850, but to be honest, I pushed him on a whole raft of questions and he couldn't even answer the simple one. So I was, I'm not even going to touch the 850. I don't rule it out, but it's a potentiality. Excuse me. So this Argos here, it was built, the capital was built archaeologically at the arrival of the Dorians, at the same archaeological period that this influx came in by land and by sea. This image clearly shows the Dorian peoples coming in from the west several hundred years before the supposed Greeks landed on the Iberian Peninsula. So again, the Greeks are supposed to have transported agriculture and their language, which we are now showing was a language that arrived from the west, but somehow their language transported west. As we discussed in a video, you've got different syllabics, and you've got linear A, linear B language, and how it ties into runic systems and pictographic languages. It's all there in previous videos if people want to go and check it out. The image also shows, with the lighter arrows, the Dorians, what would become the Ionian Greeks of Athens after a spell in Anatolia. So the people that they claim to be the Greeks had a spell in Anatolia after coming from the northwest. So it makes no sense that the Greeks transported language and culture west. It makes no sense at all to me. According to Herodotus, the Lydians are the culture that, I quote, invented all the games that are common to them. With the Greeks, these they declare they invented after they colonized Tyrrhenia, unquote. Herodotus' Histories, Book 1, paragraph 94, and that is a fantastic book, by the way. I love going through that book every now and again. Just pick it up and you land on a page and you're just like, whoa, it's mind blowing, all of it. The Lydians are people that are believed to have settled in western Turkey on the Anatolian Peninsula, and they arrived in the area around 3,000 years ago. What are the odds? Herodotus also claims the Lydians for the advent of selling goods through commerce and the first to use gold and silver coins for currency. We've already gone through some of the coins in a previous video. I never got round to doing chapter 2 of Waddell's book that was specific to the coins and the fact that certain dots on the coins are representative of certain gods, goddesses, and we also gave multiple names for them gods, whether that be Thor, Zeus, Indra. You've got all these different things that are going on there, and I've got more to do on that as well. Yes, we've got more to come on the coins, but I have done a little video on that, but it needs to be expanded so much more. This Lydian culture of Hitto-Phoenician origin would have had a strong influence on the Dorians that settled in Anatolia and became the Ionian Greeks of Attica, or the Athenians as they're known. So here's another map. So here you've got the map showing the northwest Dorians. So this has got the Dorians arriving from the northwest. It doesn't show you the arrows, but I'm presuming here by land. And then it's got the lighter coloured Dorians arriving from the south and doing like what I said, where you'd land, test the water, island hop and things like that. So you've got this Dorians to the south, Dorians to the north, which I hypothesize came along the Levant, along the, what's the sea? The sea to north of Europe, the Baltic Sea, came along the Baltic Sea and then came down south. After a certain point it came down south, and this is how they ended up arriving in the sea. It's a weird one because you're like, how could there be so many people that would go out west? Excuse me. How could there be so many people that were in the west would come back to the east? And then where's all the people that are in the east? Well, the people that are already in the east are the kin of the people that are in the west. Don't forget, they migrated out. So when, as we're going to come on to in greater detail, which is a video I'm super excited to do, by the way, we're going to get around to doing the Brutus video. We're going to see Brutus returned to the east, to this area here, as well as Carthage and all the other places the Phoenicians occupied, which were the Dorians, who left, in my eyes, Britain, or the Trojans, and took over this area, or had massive influence in this area for several hundred years before Brutus came back, gathered up what he could get, and sailed back to the west. Now, you'd be like, well, that doesn't make much sense, and maybe it doesn't to you, but if you look into the scriptures as well, you know, you've got the migrations of the lost 10 tribes. They didn't have one migration, they had two. They had two migrations out. And if you also listen to the scripture, which I'm sure the people who are watching this, to be fair, are probably more knowledgeable than I am, if you go and listen to the scripture, the lost 10 tribes, after they'd spent a period, they come back together, and then they expanded out over the world again to the edges of the earth, as it was portrayed, us, not word for word, but along them lines. I'm paraphrasing. Why would Brutus leave Italy and then go to Britain? Why would he do that? If there was all these structures and everything set up in Britain, why wouldn't Rome take that navy and go to Britain and conquer Britain? Why did Brutus go to Britain? Well, why did he go east before he went to Britain? Because, as I say, he'd migrated from the east in the past. The Dorians, all these people, when they left and came, the sea peoples, when they came flooding along the Mediterranean, they settled in a couple of key locations. Crete, in this southern area of the Aegean. They had strong influence, and the influence filtered into Anatolia, Macedonia, into all these other areas around the Caucasus, if you will. Maybe not that far, but all that area, Western Syria down to Levant. But the culture that was travelling back in was already related to this other culture. So there's a lot going on there. The last image I wanted to discuss was this map showing the strength to which these migrating peoples arrived into the area and settled. Remembering, this is long before classical Greece, at least 400 or 500 years before Herodotus. So we're going back into antiquity even for Herodotus' time. Notice the name Akkadian on this map is a later evolution of the word Ache, which is related etymologically to the words Achoyai, Achouia, Achiawa, and of course Akiwasa, meaning roughly the sea or water peoples, as discussed in my Troy part 1 video. So as you can see there, this Akkadian here is next to Attica. Now Attica's in pink in this image. Now the reason Attica is in pink in this image is because this is the end of the Mycenaeans. And like I say, people say that the Achaeans are the Mycenaeans are the Achaeans are the Mycenaeans who became the Greeks, blah blah blah. It's got whooped, and I mean they got whooped when the Dorians arrived. The Minoan civilization, which was it was the Minoan tribe of the Mycenaean civilization, if you will. They got splattered, removed from Crete. You've got all this influence moving in all around the Aegean, and who knows, these areas, like I say, that potentially were Mycenaean, they were getting battered to the point where the only place they had left was where you find Athens of today. And there's just no way that Mycenaean culture was that powerful, and the Mycenaean culture of this area could have launched 1,000 ships into this area of the Aeolic, just further north there where you get this purple here. This area is supposedly where Troy is. The Hittite Empire owns all this area. The Assyrian Empire owns all this area. The Druidic force has just come in 3000 BC. So when I hear people claim that this little pink area here, what's left of this culture that once owned all of this island chain and mainland Greece, the alleged Mycenaean Empire that had all these kings that was able to launch 1,000 ships. Where is it? It doesn't exist in this area of the world, unfortunately. When one thinks of a waterfaring culture of the past, two stick out: the Phoenician and the British empires. There's no denying that. Obviously you could say the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Vikings, these all were seafaring nations, but the two most prominent that ruled the waves are the Phoenicians and the British empires. As you can also, which are funny enough connected. As you can clearly see on the map, the region around Athens was known as Attica, as mentioned with the last image, whilst the rest of the Aegean is now of different stock. Though similar, given the time passing and the mingling of Dorians into the local population, forming new friendships and genetic ties that split from the Dorians, including the Spartans, Athenians, etc. Unless when they arrived initially, the Dorian culture was actually a member of tribes with whom were like-minded to one another and similar, or even kinsmen to the Lydians in Anatolia and beyond. So like I say, perhaps when the Dorians travelled here, this expulsion after the Trojan War in the east of England, where any of the survivors, don't forget there's a number of kings that weren't even in Britain, that were in surrounding areas in Western Europe, who knows, as far south as who knows. Was it Nestor, or was one of the kings that was the king of Ethiopia, or Ethiopia, A and E together, who apparently travelled to Troy to aid Priam. There was a king from Brittany who took allegiance, the whole of Brittany took allegiance to Great Britain despite being next to Argos in France, because Priam was offering more tribute if you join their army and all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot going on, and who knows, maybe the tribes that were sitting in the east were the Lost 10 tribes. And like I say, when Brutus eventually comes out of Rome, goes to the areas where all these Dorians and sea peoples landed, which funny enough is the same route that the Phoenicians have been travelling for years, the same route that all the tin has been found along the Mediterranean into the Levant as far as Jordan. You know, there's a lot going on. If the Trojan War did take place here in this period, as some have suggested, of 750 to 650 BC, then it would appear as though the Lydians conquered Greece and became the Ionians/Athenians, which no one is claiming as remotely possible, even though the Dorians became the Lydians, who became the Ionians, who became the Athenians during this period, just before classical Greece. The kingdom of Lydia existed around 1100 to 550 BCE, whilst the Parthenon was built in 447 BCE, for reference, several centuries after the Dorian influx. So even all this stuff like the Parthenon, the temples of Zeus and all that, none of it was there. None of it was there for hundreds of years, like half a millennia, until we hit classical Greece, and then all these temples and stuff start getting built, which is long after the Dorian influx, and long after the end of the Mycenaean and Minoan cultures. Very similar to the Trojans set up in Britain some 3,000 years ago, of fertile crop fields and an abundance of horses, with metal literally littering the ground. I recommend you check my Gog Magog video for that, which I could probably do an update on because I've come across so much more stuff on that. Indeed, many bronze pieces were discovered in East Anglia, the UK, from the late Bronze Age, including horse bridles, arrowheads, spearheads and swords, along with many other items that look remarkably Greek. So by the classical period, the Athenians believed themselves to be the greatest of the Greeks. Perhaps this spell in Anatolia is what led to Xerxes' campaign against the Athenians, who held the yoke over the Greek state by now, not Sparta. Say Sparta's gone by now, as a dominant force anyway, the dominant force. The link to Xerxes here is through the death of Cambyses, the Persian king by Darius the usurper to Cambyses II. By the way, this is from Herodotus' book Histories as well, like I say, great book. I have had some interesting ideas regarding this topic and look forward to making a video on that one day. Like I say, I've got some stuff to talk about on that. There is still more dots to connect relating to this video, so keep an eye out if you are interested. Like I say, that's going to be more why did Xerxes have such disdain for the Greeks, and why did the Greeks have such disdain for the Persians? In antiquity, they seemed a lot closer together and then drifted apart. And now in 2023, the two cultures from the Aegean into Mesopotamia, it's like apples and oranges. But once upon a time, there was a core culture that was expanding out and taking that core with it, that was changing over the time, the distances and all. Life changes, you know. Chinese whispers, it starts off one thing, by the time it gets to the end of the chain it's something else. I just wanted to talk more in depth about the languages related to these people and cultures, just when you thought the video was over. According to Pliny the Elder, quote, "The Etruscans spoke a language different from Greek, bearing in mind there has been, as discussed previously, a conflation with the term Greek, which has been applied to the Achaeans of the Iliad. Odysseus states in the Odyssey, as pointed out by Homer, that he came from a great isle in the Western Ocean. Given the only bodies of water in Asia Minor are the Eastern Mediterranean, surely he is referring to the Atlantic Ocean. This could be anywhere from the Canary Isles, Ireland or Shetland, even Iceland, which sounds far-fetched, even for me to be honest. Excuse me. However, the same writing system has been found in all of these geographical locations, which I have shown and will show further is linked to ancient cultures of Asia Minor and Mesopotamia. The Welsh language, or the Cymric, a dialect of ancient Brythonic, is claimed by the Welsh tradition to be the language and alphabet of the angels. This is a notion correlated by the Nag Hammadi texts, discovered in the desert by a shepherd in a cave. The Nag Hammadi library, also known as the... Why do I come across these words? Chenoboskian manuscripts and the Gnostic Gospels is a collection of early Christian and Gnostic texts discovered near the upper Egyptian town of Nag Hammadi in 1945, of 13 ancient books called codices, containing over 50 texts, which was discovered in Upper Egypt back in 1945. These manuscripts have similar claims of the language being, quote, God's language, unquote. Other sections of the Gnostic texts speak of the marriage of Jesus. I have pondered a bit on Jesus, and perhaps we shall do a breakdown on him as my knowledge grows. Excuse me. Yes, I used to be an atheist. I'll say it. I used to believe in space, deep space, aliens, Martians, you name it. I was balls deep in it. Excuse my word in there. But as I grew as a person, as an individual, obviously I'm into philosophy as well. I like Stoicism, I like reading. I started with similar stuff like Marcus Aurelius, excuse me, and then I evolved into more, well, I do a lot of different philosophical reading. When I was like 20, sorry for this, another segue, when I was like 20, 21, I used to be mad into the Bhagavad Gita and Krishna consciousness. I did a lot of yoga, meditating and things like that, and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. But I almost had like one eye on Krishna being an alien, and there was all this ancient alien and genetic manipulation. I wouldn't say I believed it, but it was out there and it was around me and other people were talking about it. So I got kind of sucked into that world. But then as I kept growing, as I got older, I had more time to think and contemplate, you see things in the world, I started to realise that I was becoming more and more spiritual. Now, I don't mean spiritual necessarily as in like crystals and sitting around doing all mad stuff, even though I do tend to have like crystals everywhere. Like, nice chunk of jasper there, you know. But I did find myself becoming more and more spiritual and wanting to understand more and more the scripture. So I tried to learn more about the Bhagavad Gita, obviously the battle of the Pandavas, which is brothers and sisters, and one of them enjoyed gambling and he gambled the family's wealth. There was conflict. Arjuna ends up separating from members of his family. Krishna sets up gives him two options. You can either have Krishna's army and fight off everyone in the Mahabharata, or he could have Krishna himself and have Krishna's advice. And wise decision, Arjuna, who's one of the main Pandavas, I can't believe I can remember all this, to be honest, he takes up the mantle as Krishna there, gets into all his war gear and all that, and then there's a constant conversation that takes place. My mind always ignored the conversation. I always looked to the battle. I was like ancient aliens, Vimanas, bolts of lightning, shooting lasers, Star Wars type stuff in my mind. But as I got a bit older, I started to understand and want to know more about the conversation that was taking place. And off the back of that, like I say, sorry to keep going to segues, I just snowballed and I became more and more deeper and deeper, became more and more passive to the negativity around me and focused on my own goals. And one of the things that helped liberate me during that was the acceptance for me of Jesus, whether that be as the Son of God, as a physical man, even as an imaginary figure in an imaginary book, even if you wanted to look at it in that context. But what people had died for and the compassion that people show because of Jesus made me look and think, I want a bit of that. Not that I want to just believe in something, but I want to have that feeling inside myself that like you're doing well, you know, you go down the high street and you see people with signs, the end is nigh, repent and all this kind of stuff. And maybe it's good advice, maybe it's not. Each to their own on that kind of thing. But when you look inside yourself and you do a bit of soul searching, and like I say, you start to realise that like people gave their lives for this belief. Wars were fought, entire nations collapsed and built and risen, and you're like, that's like, how's that impossible? Who would do that? What's the point in all that? But then you start to read the scripture. That stuff happens. That is the world in essence, in the Bible and stuff like that, in the Mahabharata, in the Bhagavad Gita. It's because there's this constant conflict all around us of good and evil. So do you want to align yourself with the principles of good, align yourself with the principles of evil? That's not spiritualism and atheism, by the way. It's more a case of like, what can you let go? What can't you control? What can you control? What influence can you exert on the people around you? Is it positive? Is it negative? You want to sit yourself in the positive side of things. If someone's having a bad time, be there for them. Be an arm, a shoulder to lean on. Someone's struggling financially. If you've got the capacity to help them, help them. It's all of the above. And as I started going through a lot of me research and me work and things like that, which is one of the reasons why I left the military in the end, I was like, even if someone jumped out in front of me, could I shoot them? Could I end that person's life? Because someone has put me in this position and I've got to make that decision now. So I've tried to remove that person placing me in that position and be in the place that I want to place myself in as much as I can, and just be as compassionate and caring as I can. So we'll leave that there. I will say also that I've done a video previously regarding the solar disc, with the cross as the ancient Christian symbol that goes way back to some of the earliest stone carvings here in Britain and in a number of locations to the Near East, of which is a fascinating evolution worthy of discussion further. Alas, I will just say that I have recently learned that the ancient symbol of the cross in a disc in ancient Egyptian translates to Croiso, which in turn translates in English into welcome, which I find fitting given as so-called pagan religious symbol is also used on top of a church welcoming people in. So again, I was out in Wales last week and I come across an old church and I noticed that they had this cross on it. Oh, my chain. I went for a run earlier on and it's got all tangled up. But basically, it's got that cross on it, which I associate as the Maltese cross or the cross of the Knights Templar, blah blah blah. But I'll have a couple of more photographs in a minute to show you, but if you go back and look at that previous video, I'll put a few images in there, or anyone just looks online, you'll find most of the old stone carvings in Britain are a disc with an X in it. Excuse me. Well, that goes all the way back into Sumerian, pre-Sumerian, deep antiquity as their solar worship. Now, sun, God, we haven't gone on to the theology and that element yet. I've touched on it slightly here, which I probably wish I didn't do now, but in the video in the future we are going to be doing some solid videos on whether Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, there's so much, the Greek pantheons of gods, all the way into North Africa, Egypt, so many elements of that theology in terms of the religious aspect that I've kind of got them laid out in my mind, but I'm putting pieces together. But that's going to be a deep video, because there's a lot of stuff that, like this little nugget here, there's going to be loads of little nuggets like that. A cross in a disc means, which is an ankh, translates into Welsh as Croeso, which means welcome. I can't make that stuff up. Believe me when I say there is still a lot to come. I have spent time contemplating a lot on the direction of my research and where it is taking me. Presenting information is one thing, but I am trying my best to understand and build a picture. One question seems to lead to several more questions. As for now, I think we shall leave it there. We'll leave that thread loose. Apologies for my hiatus, which, yes, I apologise for that. Sometimes we just need to unplug from the matrix, which is true. Thanks for those who stuck around. To anyone stopping by, guys, please hit the like and subscribe button and all that good stuff, and I'll catch you in the next video. Before I do my final sign off though, I will just say as well, if anyone's made it this far, even if they've had to turn it off and come back to the video, thank you so much for making it this far. I've probably waffled in all directions on this video, and I'm not going to do too much editing. I'm going to pretty much leave it as it stands, maybe do one or two little clips for pauses. But yeah, there was a lot of information. Like I say, this was more a case of touching on what we did in the last couple of videos and just solidifying one or two aspects of that. And we've already probably killed at least an hour in this video. So there we have it, guys. Like I say, thank you very much for stopping by. I appreciate everyone who comes and says hello and stops by on the channel. If anyone's got any ideas, anyone's got any theories that they'd like to put to me, correct me even, more than happy for you to type down in the comment section and I'll take it on board. But until the next one, I'll catch you in the next video. Peace. I'm conquering this